I feel like I'm at a place in my career where I'm sick of talking about race. I'm sick of talking about it. I'm sick of having the conversations. I'm sick of the hot take on whatever just happened.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other part of me is like, well, you know, how do we get through these how do we move the ball forward if we're not having these conversations? And then you kind of get into this space where like, am I having these, is it gonna do anything, or like, it gets difficult.
The thing for me, when I start to, because I think a lot of us feel that, when I start to feel I am sick of talking about this, I do something. Doing something instead of talking is such a great antidote.
Absolutely.
You know, I was out in Freeport, New York a month ago registering voters out there because Long Island could go red, could go blue, and you know, it could make the difference with who controls the House. We control who controls the House, that determines, you know, who will vote to make Washington, D.C. a state, you know, things like that. But you know, there are things we can do as individuals. And you know, instead of talking and blah, 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 you know, first and foremost, do what our ancestors shed blood for and vote. But you know, voting is not enough. Get your friends to vote, register other people to vote. You know, all of this is stuff we can do as individuals. And I find when I get sick of talking, doing just makes me feel so much better.
The reaction to what happened to you, has that put us in a better place?
I think it added to the conversation, and I think it added something that was necessary to the conversation. I think, and I always say this over and over again, that incident was not about her. It was about the racial bias that it revealed, and how, for a lot of, particularly white people, because we as black people know, you know, we've experienced it, but a lot of people were clueless. They're like, Obama was elected president, right. We're all good now. And they don't realize just how deeply racial bias permeates our culture. And yet here it was for everybody to see in a city as liberal as New York, with someone who didn't use any slurs.
Absolutely.
And I think bringing that racial bias, letting people understand that it's there, was important, particularly because it bubbles up in ways that are far more important in our society, as evidenced later that same day, when that racial bias made a police officer in Minneapolis, a white police officer, think it was okay for him to kneel on the neck of a black man until that man was dead. And for 3 other officers, or 4, I forget how many, to stand around and not do anything as he did that. That's the racial bias. That's what we have to fight against.